Welcome to the Life with Grief podcast. I'm your host, grief and soul purpose coach, and fellow griever, Tara Accardo. Elizabeth, welcome to the Life with Grief podcast. I am so excited to have this conversation. It is very long overdue, and I mentioned this in the intro, but I had the pleasure of being on your wonderful podcast as well, and we had such a great, I feel like it was such a jam-packed conversation of just goodness that I was so excited to have you here today as well. So I'm really excited to dig into this with you, but you're also just such a beautiful soul and such a light. So I know you're just going to offer listeners so much here today. So I'm so
Thank you.
excited that you're
Thank you
here.
for saying that. Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for having me here. And
Of
yes,
course.
we had an amazing conversation, which we're going to have a part two of that, right?
Oh yeah.
There's so much conversation about this topic. So I can't
Uh-huh.
wait to do this with you and
Dig
just
into it.
continue on chatting.
Yeah, definitely. Well, all right. Without further ado, let's get into it then. So, what I would love to do is just have you start by telling people a little bit about yourself. Anything that you like to do for fun, hobbies, fun facts, all of that before we get into all of the griefy stuff, if you will.
Sure, of course. Okay, where do I start? Well, my I live with my husband here in Los Angeles area. We've been here for almost 12 years, and we love to travel. And in fact, we just
Mhm.
got back from a trip, with an epic, adventurous trip from the Maldives 2 weeks ago. So we have another. We're planning on another trip in a few months. So we're
Oh
in
my
that
gosh,
realm. That's what we love to do, and
living
that's where we
vicariously through you right now.
yeah, it's amazing, and that's how we really spend our time, quality time together. Because when we get home, then we just get busy. I
Mhm.
love to dance, although I haven't done that in a long time. Like I like taking dance lessons, especially salsa and bachata. So those are
Fun.
the things. And then I am a podcast host as well, like you
Mhm.
mentioned, because I've had you on.
Yeah.
And I am a mental health advocate. Those are my passions. And now I'm creating this community, building this community of women who are childless by chance, not by choice. And
Yes.
that's where
Okay.
my
Well,
true passion is right now.
yes, and you do a beautiful job of it. So let's dig into that. I would love for
Mhm.
you to explain for anyone listening here who can probably just relate to that in and of itself, but just spill all the tea, divulge what that is, what that means to you, just your journey with grief and loss in that way.
Yeah, I think I'll start with my husband and I got married at a later age. Like I was like 39. We're both 39.
Mhm.
And so we started, with our age, we already started late and trying to start our family. But even with that, we still wanted to, we were very hopeful, and we started
Mhm.
started to try.
Yeah.
I've had a miscarriage in the first year of our marriage when I got pregnant naturally. And then so that became like, a reality check for me, because prior to that, I didn't think that, I would have any issues per se.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that it was going to happen to me because I come from a very big Asian family and,
Mhm.
Filipino family, and no one in my family, and the women, had any issues. So it was unexplained infertility, but that really was the beginning of our infertility journey. So
Mhm.
miscarriage happened, and then a year later we started seeing a fertility specialist, and then for about 5 years we went through the infertility treatment. So I went through the IUI, I went through the IVF, and I got to a point where, in the roller coaster of emotions, where you're hopeful, you're excited, and you really want to be cautiously optimistic, which
Yeah.
I've learned that there is no such thing. It's either you're hopeful or you're not, right?
Mhm.
So but then having realized that after each treatment it never really worked out, and so
Yeah.
the heartbreak begins, the depression kind of gets triggered. And so it was like that for a good 5 years, until I found myself like really losing myself in it, in the whole process.
Mhm.
And I lost myself, like really, depression hit me hard, but I was still
Mhm.
functional. I was still functioning,
Yeah.
but at the same time I wasn't sure how to go through the whole thing. And at that time, there were not many conversations around it. And just specifically about grief, I didn't know that I was going through grief. So, again,
Yeah.
that's something that we can really dive into later. But
Mhm.
for most of my infertility journey, I did not realize I was going through grief because of that IVF process until I was seeing therapists, but even then they would bring it up, but it never really clicked with
Right.
me because I had my own definition of grief,
Mhm.
as probably most people do. So, anyway, just to go back to that journey, until a couple of, after the last IVF treatment, I told my husband, I'm done,
Yeah.
we were exploring other options, but I was not ready and I needed to give myself time. So I
Of
gave
course.
myself a couple of years until I opened up to the adoption, just the idea of adoption.
Yeah.
And long story short, we went through 3 years of adoption, but we had two failed adoptions.
Oh my
So it
god.
was just like heartbreak after heartbreak. And
No kidding.
that pretty much summed up a 10-year journey for us as a married couple. And I got to a point personally for me, and I think I got there first before my husband because being a woman, I also went through the whole, the miscarriage, my body, physical, mental, emotional. It was different from
Yeah.
what my husband was going through, as you can
Of
imagine.
course.
And I just said, I think I'm done. So that was, it took a while for us, the two of us. We actually went away to Palm Springs, really just healing and
Mhm.
really making a conscious decision. Is this it for us? Are we okay moving forward without children and really living a life of just us, a family of two? Right?
Yeah.
So it's been a process. It's been a year and a half since.
Okay.
And that was really the beginning of my conscious effort to heal from grief. That
Yeah.
was really the only time I acknowledged that I was going through grief. Because through the
Mhm.
infertility process, I was just like, no, this is not grief. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
and I wasn't really talking much to support group. I didn't have any other women who knew what I was going through. So
Mhm.
I was suffering in silence, if for lack of a better way of saying it. So I was really pretty much on my own. And yeah, so it's been a year and a half since, and it's been a process, but it's been
Yeah.
also wonderful in a way that I've learned so much about myself, and which
Mhm.
is a sign of healing for me and
Yeah.
really
Yes.
accepting and embracing what is now,
Yeah.
as opposed to always going back to the past and things that did not work out.
Right, which is easy to do, and it's valid that we do that, right? We're human, like, of course, we're gonna have those moments of living in the past a little bit or the coulda, woulda, shouldas or all the things, like, I think that's very natural, but I love how you just said that, like, that is, like, a sign of healing for you, the what you've learned about yourself, what you continue to learn about yourself. I've never had someone kind of articulate it in that way, but, like, I love that so much, and it's like and it's so interesting too because, like, I always, say that, like, healing is kinda we're never done, really, but, like,
Right.
it's that's but we're also never really done evolving or transforming as, like, a human either. We're constantly learning new things about ourselves, about the world, other people, so, like, what a beautiful opportunity and what an amazing mindset shift to kinda, like, turn that into an opportunity for curiosity
Mhm.
and and I mean, just and then, creating everything that you have from it, and you've really, um, turned your pain into purpose, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I definitely wanna dig into all of that,
Right,
but
right, right.
can you take me back just a little bit? So you mentioned you suffered a miscarriage. Don't expect you to go into any detail or anything about that,
Sure.
but for anyone here listening who, has maybe gone through that, I actually just had a friend who, went through a chemical pregnancy,
Hmm.
which I know a decent amount of it that happens more often than I think
Yes.
people think, and, like, other even influencers that I follow, have been through that. Um, and I think there can even be grief around that because one way or another, you still, for a moment, at least, however long that was, thought you were pregnant. Um, just can you talk to me about how did you because I was like kinda it sounds like the very beginning of this journey for you. How did you cope with that grief specifically? And then I would definitely love to, get into just like the IVF and all of that journey that you went on. But like with the miscarriage specifically, How did you navigate that? Because I have no doubt there's some people here listening who've experienced that as well.
Yeah, and I think I honestly didn't know. I didn't have specific ways on how to cope with it
Yeah.
because I've never, at that time, I didn't know anyone who has suffered from miscarriage, not in my
Mhm.
family and not in my network of close friends, right?
Yeah.
But what's interesting was the moment I shared this with a friend of mine, friend way back in high school, she's one of my bridesmaids. And then
Mhm.
she told me, as soon as I shared with me, she's like, "Oh, I've had a couple of miscarriages before." She has two kids now, grown ups,
Okay.
and I'm actually a godmother to her oldest child. And she's like, "Oh, yeah, I've had a couple of miscarriages, and that happens a lot." You know, and she's coming from a place where she's had a child after that, like she has
Yeah.
two children now, right? And so she kind of downplayed it in a way. So for
Yeah.
me,
It's like,
it
that at least
didn't.
statement sort of like,
Right. It
but she's
maybe
not
it was a
saying that without saying
twofold.
that.
Right. It was a twofold for me. It felt comforting to know that it was more common than I really thought because the first one
Mhm.
who told me that was my doctor. It happens more than you realize. And I
Yeah.
was like, that doesn't help me.
Okay,
Okay. I
doesn't
don't
make me
know
feel better.
anyone. Exactly. That doesn't make me feel better. But then my friend being close to me, but we haven't, and she lives out of state. So when she told me that, she's like, "Oh, okay." It was comforting in a way because, oh, I know someone else going through this. But at the same time,
Yeah.
I didn't, it didn't resonate with me as much because also she's coming from a place where she has two
She does
children
have
at
it
this
now.
point, right?
Yeah.
So I was really lost, to be honest. I was
Mhm.
lost. I remember my sister in law sent me flowers, and then I was like, oh, okay,
Like,
so
wow.
normally you send flowers, right? You send flowers to someone who's actually like if you have a close one or a loved one or a
Lost a
friend
loved
who's
one or
died.
something, what we all
But I
assume.
didn't
Yeah.
think of it. And again, and like I mentioned earlier, I didn't think of it as grief. For me, it was a loss, but I didn't think it was a quote unquote real loss.
Mhm.
And I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way. And I was almost ashamed of it at the same time because it's like, was it my fault? Is my body too old? Like I could not even hold a pregnancy. There was a lot of
Right.
shame and blame and emotional turmoil and not knowing how to really navigate through it. Now, I was going through therapy at the same time, but again, the therapy helped in talking it through, but
Mhm.
it wasn't comforting because what I needed was empathy.
Right.
I needed someone to talk to who's gone through exactly what I went through, and I
Yeah.
didn't have that at that time. So depression triggered, and it actually created also some kind of wedge between me and my husband because he handled it differently.
Yeah. Okay, I'm so glad you brought this up.
Yeah.
I would love to hone in on
Yes.
that for a
Yes,
second
yes.
because I would love to understand how this has, I'm gonna say, affected you as a couple. I use that term loosely, but yeah, walk us through that.
Yeah, I think it created that wedge, which created this disconnect between the two of us. And I felt so alone because
Mhm.
I was grieving in my own ways and he was grieving very differently. And
Right.
obviously, it was my body. And so there was a lot more into it. And I was the one who got pregnant. And
Mhm.
I remember when the doctor said, like, no, there's no more heartbeat. And so for me, it was like, oh, my heart sunk. And I'm like, okay, what does this mean? Is it really? But my body was still thinking that it was pregnant. So they said
Right.
you have two options, and not to be triggering for anyone who's listening to this
Yeah.
who's gone through it, but we had two options. One was to go through the whole, procedure, and the
Mhm.
DNC, and one was
Yep.
to let your body sort of let it come out naturally, if you will.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, I'm not sure. I don't even know what to do, and I didn't know who to talk to until I
Yeah.
think a couple of days later when it started sinking that, okay, this is no longer a viable baby. I actually turned really angry and I was like, get this out of me. And I even called it. Get this out of me. Let's schedule
Or
a procedure right away. So I
yeah.
had the anger, I had the emotion, I had the frustration, the shame, all of these emotions. And I had no idea what my husband was thinking. Now, one
Mhm.
of our strengths actually is communication. So we're really good in having
So
these deep
good.
conversations. However, even in this time, we didn't know how to talk about it. We didn't
Mhm.
know how to converse. We didn't know how to connect. So it created a wedge for us in a way that I started getting irritable and I wanted to be on my own because for me,
Yeah.
it's like, you don't know how I feel.
Yeah.
Like, don't say that it's going to be okay. And I was going through the whole process of, the grief, right? Like the anger
Yeah.
is there and the frustration. So we had to talk to a counselor to just get through
Mhm.
it in a way
Mhm.
to be able to really understand more of each other. But it wasn't like a
Mhm.
quick fix, right?
Right.
It was a process. I think it took us like 6 to 12 months to really even accept the fact that, okay, this is grief.
Mhm.
But even then, it's just like, is this really, personally for me?
Yeah.
I still wasn't sure. But my husband, again, really just didn't even know how to express himself with it. Like, he
Mhm.
didn't know how to comfort me.
Yeah, because he
And,
barely knew probably what was going on with him. My husband
right.
and I went through this exact same thing when we were dating at
Yeah.
the time, but, like, with when around my parents' deaths, it was I mean, so much of what you're saying is just hitting home for me right now because, like, you and usually you might, like, pride yourself on your communication, but, like, if you have not been through something
Yeah.
traumatic before,
Oh
and
my
whatever
gosh,
this is like for anyone
100%.
here listening, like, forget about it.
Yeah.
Like, that kinda goes out the window because 'cause you're numb, you're shocked, you're feeling everything also at the same time. It's just, like, so confounding. So you're just
Yeah.
like, "Where am I?" Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And people deal with grief differently, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And but you don't expect that with you and your husband just because
Mhm.
you suffer this the same loss
Like,
and
together, but,
right
like, it's so
together.
different for
But
each
at the
person,
same
though. Yeah.
time, like, why the disconnect? And so there was a lot of
Yeah.
that. And I think at some point I even considered like, and because we were still newlyweds, right? So this is my
Mhm.
second marriage.
Okay.
And so for me, it's like, oh my gosh, is this not going to work? Like, is it
Ugh.
just going to be like this? Because there was so much disconnect. Like, we were not understanding each other.
Wow.
And I was questioning so many things, and he probably was too. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was a very definition, I think, of grief that I didn't know at that time, you know?
Yeah. That makes complete sense. So, okay, so you go through this horrible loss. And then you mentioned that you went on a journey of IVF, and what is the other one? I always blank
The
on it. IVF,
IUI.
IUI.
Yeah.
So, really quick, can you explain the difference between those 2?
That
Is
I don't
there
remember a lot of the terminology, but
Okay,
IUI
yeah.
is less invasive. But really,
Okay, that's
IUI
what I thought.
is almost like putting the sperm inside of you as opposed
Okay.
to putting the embryo,
Okay, got it.
right?
Okay,
So
perfect,
it's
that
more
makes
of
sense.
assisted, right? And then the
Right,
embryo, the IVF is actually having it become an embryo first and then put it inside of
right.
you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So, at what point did you decide to take that path? Like, after this miscarriage, did you feel that you at least got to a point that you were not maybe certainly healed, right? But, like,
Hmm.
you got it sounds like you maybe got to a point where you're like, "Okay, I think we're open to other options." Like, we feel like we're okay, we're a little more aligned now, we're better, together and then individually maybe, and then, like, how did those conversations start and, like, kinda how did you move forward from there?
Honestly, my OBGYN went after the miscarriage, the follow-up appointments.
Yeah,
He was advising me to see a fertility specialist, and I
okay.
was this girl who was in complete denial. No, I'm
Yeah.
not infertile. It's just one of those
Right.
things that, like, I don't have any issues. I have no medical issues. Like, I don't want to see a fertility specialist
Yeah.
because for me, I knew that the IVF, the treatments were the next in line, right? The next
Mhm.
option for us. But I personally do not have a good history with medications, with drugs. So I was
Okay.
very much opposed to it. My body just reacts to drugs. Having gone through, I have a history of depression when I was in my 20s, and I was in a boatload of medications that just made me feel worse.
Oh
And so
gosh.
I got to a point where I needed to stop all the medications because they were making me feel worse.
Yeah.
And I quit cold turkey and I opted
Oh my
for
gosh.
natural healing, more alternative options. So
Right.
from then on, I'm very opposed to drugs. And
Yeah.
IVF is very much the opposite of that. So I
That
was
is a
very
whole bunch of drugs.
resistant to it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think I got to a point that maybe getting into a year later after the miscarriage, I realized like I knew the reality that I was aging. And
Mhm,
at that point, I think I was about 41 going into 42.
mhm.
Um, I knew my doctors, the fertility specialists, were already telling me that the age is not in our favor, our age,
Mhm.
my age. But for
Isn't like
me,
35 a geriatric pregnancy
oh my
technically?
gosh, yes. Yeah.
Which
Eh,
I also take issue with, but okay.
I
Um,
know. It's like, where are we from the 1960s or something? Like, I don't know. Like, why is geriatric like 35?
yeah, and also just that word. Anyway, sorry, I had to sidebar because I heard that and I was like, "You've gotta be joking."
Oh,
Anyway,
yeah. I was making fun of myself. I'm like, oh, yeah, geriatric now, you know?
yeah, like, crazy.
But yeah, they said that just keep in mind that it's not guaranteed, and this is like the percentage of the success rate. And but in my mind, I didn't want to regret not doing it. So if there was a
Yeah.
time, this would be it.
Yep.
So I think I like to live in my life without regrets. So I would try it anyway. So that was really my sort of deciding factor. Okay, my age, and I don't have the leisure of waiting another year or 2 years to decide. And I'm like, let's just go for it. But that's why we opted for IUI because it's less invasive. It was
Got
less
it.
medication,
Yep.
and we're like, let's try that. We did that twice in about a year and a half because
Okay.
they have to keep waiting for your cycle. If it's not the right cycle, let's wait for the
Wondering
next
about
cycle. It's
that.
a lot of
Yeah.
that. So
Okay.
it's just a lot of waiting. And so
Yeah.
when that didn't happen, they're like, do you want to consider IVF? And then I was like, I'm already in at this point. Let's just keep going
I
because
have
at that point
nothing
I
to
was
lose.
already putting drugs in my body. And
Yeah.
yes, I changed like I've lost myself again in a way that these hormones drugs that I was injecting in my body were like really I gained weight. It was
Yeah.
also triggering my moods and my emotions and all of that. They just make you crazy.
Yeah.
But some women are lucky enough that they don't have these side effects. I was just one of those, that very sensitive to it. So I
Yeah.
just kept going and thought that,
Wow.
okay, at least I know I tried my best,
Yeah.
and that was that.
That's, like,
Yeah.
all you can say at the end of the day. That's what I always say too, and it's like, with anything in life, sort of, I feel like a lot of grievers struggle with just, like, questioning whether they're doing the right thing or enough or whatever, and, like, this sort of unofficial, like, mantra or sort of mindset that I've come to adopt, if you will, is, like, as long as I can, like, put my head on the pillow at night knowing I did the best I could that
Yeah.
day and did my best to make the right decisions and did my best to be nice to people and all of the things, like,
Yeah.
then I can feel okay, and
Yeah.
you will live with as little regret as possible. There might be things here and there, but, like, that was definitely something that I've learned in my healing journey and my growth journey from all of this, if you will, is, like, just having that self-awareness and that time to
Hmm.
reflect of, like, okay, this is within my control, as you know better than anybody. It's like there's many circumstances and things that are very much out of our control. And when we're grieving and when we're going through difficult times, it can feel like literally nothing is in our control. And that can feel very frustrating, very isolating, very sad, very unsettling. It's, brings up all the emotions. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's
It's
what I come back to, at least as much as possible. It's like, okay, what can I control right here, right now? And not that it's all about control, but you know what I mean? It's just
right.
I'm so
Yeah. Oh,
or
absolutely.
just anything.
And here's the thing for me, right? It wasn't just about having my own regrets. I also
Yeah.
feel somehow responsible to our marriage and to our
Of course,
partnership.
yeah. Yeah.
And I needed to make sure that, okay, I know in my heart that I did my best, but I also have to be considerate to what my husband is thinking
Yeah.
and feeling. And if he said, can we try another time? And I think the last IVF that we did, so we did 3 cycles of IVF. The third time was actually, he's like, can we
Let's
try
oh my
another
god.
time? If it were up to me, I probably would have stopped with one IVF because
Yeah,
I've already done the 2 IUIs then.
right.
But I felt responsible in a way that, okay, I don't want to rob him off of this chance and this
Yeah.
opportunity and the possibility of having a child. So I kept going with it until I realized and I checked in with myself, when you're really starting to lose yourself and you compromise yourself, that's when I needed to be honest and then had this hard conversation with him. Like, I'm done,
Yeah,
just with all these cycles. And he knew, he saw it in me that
of course,
I
yeah.
was already like just not myself, and these drugs were not helping me in any way. I was getting bigger but not getting pregnant, it was like a
Right.
joke. And I'm like, I'm gaining weight, but then I'm
Oh,
not
that's
getting pregnant. Like, what
such
the
a
heck?
sick joke, like, oh
It
my
was,
god, yeah. Oh my gosh, you're
yeah.
not feeling yourself probably in all what physically, emotionally, mentally, I mean,
No.
my god, in 3 rounds, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing too, and, like, they can't help the fact that, like, this isn't happening to them physically, but, like, I would imagine it's very easy for them to be like, "No, let's keep going, let's keep trying." You're like, it's not it's happening to them, but it's not happening to them,
Mm,
you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
and but he sounds amazing in that he's considerate of that and, but
Yeah.
I don't blame you for being like, "I gotta shut this down," nor do I
Yeah.
blame him, of course, for being
Yeah.
like, "Can we keep trying?" Like, it's so sweet that he, like, wants it that bad and wants it as bad as you do, so it's oh my gosh, just
It was
so
a
much.
hard decision. It was really hard decision. Like,
Yeah,
when is this enough? Is this enough time to like give it to keep trying?
yeah.
But then, and I also prayed, like, I am a woman of faith,
Mhm.
and so it's like learning the balance and having that wisdom, right? Like, you pray for that wisdom, that serenity prayer, like knowing
Yeah,
like when to keep going and when to stop, and
yeah.
it
You
just
just knew. It was
right, yeah.
yeah. So, you go through all of these rounds of all of these crazy things. Okay, so at what point then did you call it quits on that and then move into the adoption conversation? What did that time frame look like?
I think I took a break for a couple of years, 2.5 years.
I mean,
I
that's your
didn't
body and
want.
mind probably needed it.
Right. I exactly. I needed to really make amends first with what my
Yeah,
body went through, what I went through, the
everything.
roller coaster ride, like all the
Yeah.
heartaches after each treatment. And we also had a chemical pregnancy from one of the cycles, right, from the IVF. So it was
Okay.
just like one of those things. Um, I took a
Oh,
break, and I think I really needed it. That's when I started to see another coach, like a mindfulness coach who
that's
specializes in
great.
fertility. And I went through this mindfulness program, and I did everything that I could, and I started practicing yoga. Then it was Kundalini yoga, which is it's
Yeah,
very healing and very
it's
much
great.
breath work. And I think it was that time that I started opening up to the idea of
Mhm.
adoption, because I've heard so many horror stories of adoption, but I think I was also exposed. Like, I started being aware of the beautiful stories again, also,
Yeah.
that came out of adoption. So I started opening up to it, and my husband actually got really excited because he got there first. He was like, "What about adoption?" I said, "No, I'm
Mhm.
not. Like, I don't know if I could." And with everything that's gone through, so again, my
Mhm.
emotional health, my mental health, I needed to really keep it in check and know
Yeah.
when to stop doing everything, all the efforts, or keep going.
Right.
But for some reason, I did open up, and he got excited, and we started the process, and it actually turned out to be around like right before the pandemic, when
Mm.
we had done all the paperwork. And but even when I opened up to it and we started doing all the logistics and the paperwork, we had to go through home study and everything, medical checkup.
Oh, yeah. It's a
You talk to the
long
lawyers. It's
process.
a long process, a lot of time, energy, and financial investment. But I remember saying this, like, because we were trying to do private adoption. So
Yeah.
we had this sort of brochure, right? Booklet that you give onto the birth moms. And I said, this is a glorified brochure. And I was starting to get resentful. I'm like, I can't believe we have to pay so much money just to have these
Yeah.
and make these brochure of us selling us. I don't want to sell ourselves. Like,
It's gotta feel so
why?
weird.
It
Ugh.
was weird and
Yeah.
irritating at the same time. It
Yeah.
was annoying, the whole
I'd
process of it. But
imagine.
then, and actually, it took me a while to even write up, because you write up paragraphs about you, about your marriage, and about your family.
There's so much
It
pressure
was,
to that. You're, like, literally trying to convince me think about that. You're trying to convince people to give you their child. Like, you can't even, like,
Oh,
wrap your head around the
yeah,
gravity of that.
right?
How do
It's
you summarize yourself and your husband and your lifestyle and all the things in, like, a matter of paragraphs?
yeah.
It's crazy. Oh my god.
And I couldn't find the time. I was stalling. I
I don't blame
procrastinated,
you.
and my husband was like, "You haven't written your description yet," or I said, "I'll do it tomorrow," and then tomorrow, and then months have passed, and I said, "Okay, okay, okay, I'll do it." But it took me a while to get there because I was so resentful and bitter about the whole
Yeah,
process of it. But then I said,
crazy.
"Okay, let's just keep going," and yeah, and we had, I think, a year into it. We were waiting to get matched, and then there was this 6-month-old baby that with the birth mom who picked us out, and it was a different process. We were really, our goal was to have a newborn, but there was a special case, 6-month-old, which is a different way of transitioning,
Mhm.
different process in a way. And so there was one week that we would have the baby, 6-month-old baby, for a day, and then we would bring him back for nighttime. So we had him for a week,
Wow.
and he was local, and we had him for a week. And then that one week, the end of that week, it was his first night. He was going to be a sleepover, but as part of
Oh,
the transition, we bought
yeah.
everything. His crib was ready, his room,
Oh,
and only to find out that the birth mom was changing her mind, and she was starting to kind of go in circles and
I
trying
had a
to have
feeling
these,
that's where
yeah.
it was going. Oh
And
my god, I'm
that
so sorry.
was that was that was a heartbreak. But like
Devastating.
it was a different kind of loss from the treatments,
How do you
right?
even
Because
explain that? Like,
yeah.
oh my god.
And when I said earlier,
Oh,
the lawyer kept telling us, be cautiously optimistic. And
yeah,
that's when I learned there is no such thing, because when I had the baby, I was all in. I was taking, I was feeding
took it
him. I put him
seriously.
to sleep, and I was rocking him. We were in the backyard. We had moments. I was documenting everything because I wanted him to have these, videos of him when we met him. There was a lot of that, and there was no such thing as cautiously optimistic. You're just all in.
Right.
And then only to be taken away from you when you had that one week of like, oh wow, this is really happening. We're actually having a nursery room now. So it shook us in different ways that we were also finding out for the first time. It's different from all the treatments and the miscarriage, even because we had this baby, right?
Yeah.
And I was so devastated, and I was so bitter. I was like, I think 1 month later, I said, where can we go? Where can we travel to? Where can we go?
Yeah, where
What's
can
in
I
our
escape?
bucket list that we don't have to bring a baby? And we ended up going to Kenya and Tanzania,
Amazing.
which has
Okay, well,
been
there's a
healing, very the
consolation.
most,
Oh my
right? It was
god.
the most healing trip that we've
Oh.
ever done, because I was very intentional about um,
Like what
going
you did
through
where you
the
went and
right, the
stuff,
loss,
yeah.
right. It was
Oh,
really my husband. This was the first time I saw my husband really heartbroken, because he had the baby, he was putting him to sleep, and
yeah.
he had that experience, which is different from the miscarriage, right? Like I didn't see that in him. He processed it differently. This time we
Yeah,
were actually in it together,
right, and you
and
had a
it was the
literal
first time.
baby in front of you, and you said a little boy, so I just note my husband, he loves our daughter, it's great having a girl, but I think there is something to be said about, like, having a little like, imagining having, like, a little you
Yeah,
that, like,
right.
say you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and I get it, my husband would love a son, we'll see, but, like, I don't know, maybe your husband envisioned sort of some of that in
Yeah.
this little baby too, and so just so many little
Yeah.
nuances
And
that
I
have
think
to be
that broke my
considered.
heart even more, seeing
Yeah,
him grieve, like
right.
grieve with this baby. That broke my heart even more than
Yeah.
anything
It's a
else.
whole future you thought you were
Yeah,
gonna have,
yeah,
and it's
yeah,
ripped away
yeah,
from you.
yeah.
So how did you get the nerve, the bravery, and the courage to do this a second time? Because you said you had
Yeah, we
2,
had a
right?
second time.
And what was the time frame
Well,
between both of those?
actually, okay, maybe if I'm trying to remember it now. So this has
No,
been
it's like the whole timeline is just
yeah,
like
4 years ago now. So this is 4 years ago, I think.
okay.
But what happened was before the Africa trip.
Mhm.
So I think this was in August. August, it happened, and the birth mom changed her mind, and we were like, devastated.
Right.
2 weeks later, we were called. There was a newborn baby in San Francisco. We're
Oh
in
my god.
LA, 6 hours
Yeah.
away, and the birth dad, actually had the baby, and so
Okay.
we had at that time, because newborn, before the social worker takes over, we
Mhm.
had to decide within 48 hours.
Oh my
And
god.
I we have never been so like focused in, well, what do we do? Okay, and I'm still healing from this one, but
Yeah.
maybe this is a sign. What if we were
I was
not,
literally just
there's a
thinking
lot of
that.
that, right? What if we
Yeah.
were not really supposed to have that baby? Maybe this is
Maybe
our
this is our
baby,
baby. This
right?
reminded me of
And
the Sex and the City episode, by the way, of Charlotte and Harry going through this, and I'm like, what a freaking emotional roller coaster.
right. Oh my
That took a
goodness.
little risk to that, but,
Exactly.
like, oh my
Yeah.
god, this is such, like, a pop
it,
culture
it was
example.
it was very much like that. It was very
What?
much like, what if? And then I even
Crazy.
told my husband, because he was a little bit, because again, he was very brokenhearted, and I this is
Yes.
the first time I really got to see him very emotional. And then so he was very much kind of 50-50. But
Yeah.
with my faith, I was like, who are we to turn down this baby if we're giving
Yeah.
the second chance? Who
Oh,
are
that's
we
so
to turn down?
sweet.
And that kind of opened his eyes until, okay, we're leaving. We're going. We said yes. We had 24 hours to drive to San Francisco.
Oh my
That
god.
same night, I have a cousin who's got 3 kids. She's like, okay, let's go shop for baby clothes. This time, this is a baby girl.
Okay.
And we shopped for everything that we needed. We were on our way to San Francisco. We're driving. I have a suitcase full of newly washed baby stuff. Halfway through it, we get a phone call that the dad is kind of like so. And I was driving, like my husband and I were taking turns. I was driving at that time,
Oh my god.
and our lawyer or social worker was on speakerphone. I said, "What do you mean so?" We stop in the middle of nowhere, and this is
Yep.
like the desert part,
Yeah.
and like no, and so we were like just in disbelief, and then we didn't even know what to
You're
make
like, "This is
of
not
this whole
happening again.
situation. Exactly, this can't be happening again.
This is unreal."
Exactly, until we're like, it's already, he was already having sort of, he's not positive yet, he's not sure, but the uncertainty also tells us like the hesitation is no, that's it. And I'm not driving all the way there
Yep.
only to find out again, because again, we're still fresh 2 weeks prior. So we
No,
said,
for
no,
him.
we're driving back home.
Yeah.
But
And
we literally stayed in that, like, the middle of nowhere. My husband was so angry and livid, like really, like he's
that
screaming. I'm sobbing. I took a picture of this and
oh,
actually shared it on social
chills.
media, because it's
Oh my
like,
god.
is this really happening to us again? Like,
Mhm.
what happened to our second chance? What is the point of all of this? I was
Mhm.
questioning my faith, because I said, what is the
Yeah.
point?
Yeah.
I don't I we couldn't make a sense of it. I was trying to find reasons why this
Yeah.
was
Like,
happening
"Why are
to
you
us.
doing this to me? What is"
Yeah,
all
and
those things. "What did I
and
do to deserve this? Why us? Why me?"
yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of those. And we drove. It was the most somber like drive that we had
Oh,
to endure,
only
and we drove
imagine.
back home. And that's when I think, I was upset, we were devastated, and we were angry. And that's how it came about. Like, where can we go?
We're
Let's get out
going
of
on a
here.
trip.
We're going on a trip. And that
Yeah.
was August. And then we did the trip in a month. Like,
Oh,
we
amazing.
contacted a travel agent, and then we left the next, like, in September. And then
Good.
it became one of the most beautiful trip that we've had, very intentional.
Yeah.
And when you're in a scenery such as Africa, like Kenya
Yeah.
and Tanzania, it makes you feel so small, that you
Yes.
realize in the bigger picture that you are just one of these wildlife animals, and that
Yeah.
your problem and your everything that you're going through is very minuscule compared to the world, right?
Right.
This
Like,
Mother Earth, right?
not to of course, I know this is not at all
Not to
what you're saying, and
diminish, right? Not to
exactly. No, we're
diminish,
not
not to
diminishing, not
diminish the
minimizing.
grief. No.
You're so right about that, and I agree, and I've had those kind of aha moment, or even if they were kind of not even aha, but subtle moments where I've also realized the same thing, and it is a very weird, sometimes kinda difficult, sometimes kinda like, "Ooh, this is humbling" moment, but there's, like, can also be some weird comfort in it, and there's sometimes a level of peace that can wash over
Mhm.
us in that moment. And it's
Absolutely.
like, we can like almost like take a deep breath a little bit and exhale everything we've kind of been feeling, and not that it's not
Right.
gonna come up again, but
Right.
like I love so much that you just said that, because I think that is yeah, so true. And traveling, I've had that, and then just like in random moments throughout my life I've had that.
Right.
And but we have but you're such a beautiful example though of being open to that and being open to those moments and not shying away from that, because that's also very easy to do. And
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. It was, and I did that, right? I've done that.
Yeah.
I have locked myself in the room for days and weeks at a time when I went through the infertility treatments. I
Yeah.
think at that point that was like sort of like the tail end of this 10-year journey, right? It
Yep.
was a tail end of it. We have grown. We have been doing the work
Yeah.
individually and as a couple.
I was gonna say, yeah.
And
Yeah.
we have our own individual therapists, and we have our
So
couples therapist,
good.
so we're seeking all the help that we could get.
I
And
love
at
that.
some point you really grow and you realize that, okay, this is it, like this acceptance of what is.
Yeah. Of
And again, not to minimize the loss,
course.
but there's really nothing you can do at this point. Like, I
Mhm.
can't fight it anymore. We've done everything that we could. So
Yeah.
why keep going in that direction? And then don't they say that there's a definition of the very definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and
Yeah.
expecting the same
Same
result?
result. Yeah.
And for me, going on this trip also was very intentional, and not to escape,
Mhm.
but to almost seek answers, right? In a
Yeah.
rhetorical way,
Yeah.
and get out of your space, because I know I would have been depressed,
Yeah.
right? And I
Yep.
still went through some depressive symptoms. And I know this
Mhm.
because I went through clinical depression. And
Right.
so now it's circumstantial. I was able to sort of decipher my emotions and where is this coming from? Oh, okay, this is the loss, this is the grief.
Mhm.
But I'm also allowed to see. I think this trip, literally, it took me out of this space where I was really grieving and I was crying and I was devastated, but I was able to see a bigger picture, that
Yeah.
maybe this is really not the path for us, and maybe this
Mhm.
is, there's something bigger planned
Yep.
for us. I don't know what, and I still don't know to this day, but I
Mhm.
still believe in that. I think I hold on to that belief because there's nothing else that I can hold on to.
Yeah, you're also just like,
You know?
what else am I gonna hold on to? Like,
Exactly.
I
There's
think that's
nothing else, right?
yeah, yeah, which is like so depressing sounding, but like
It was-
there's plenty. No, but like we can laugh now, right? But
Right.
like
Yeah,
all jokes
absolutely.
aside, like that's so true. And just but you're again, oh my gosh, I just give you so much credit, all the credit in the world for my gosh, again, getting to this place, being open to getting to this place, and even just cracking that door open to be again, I keep using the word curious, like curious about what what there is, like kind of a resignation of like, okay, this is what this is. I don't have to quote accept it. I don't have to be okay with it. I don't have to, I'll mourn this perhaps the
Hmm.
rest of my life, but I am choosing to see it differently and
Hmm.
actively doing things that help, that enhance that empower you to dig into that. And and it's led you to some of the work that you do and all of these incredible travels, and like, my God, maybe that's your thing. Maybe you guys are just meant to travel the world
I know.
unencumbered by
I know,
kids.
right? I know.
Oh,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh, yes. And we love it now. And I think we're able to see now the freedom that we have to do
yeah,
whatever we want to do. Not
yeah,
to say that the grief it's been a year and a half since
yeah.
we decided to end
You're just like,
everything.
you are done. Yeah.
Right. But it's still here. And in fact, there was
Mhm.
an episode that I talked about it recently, and I call it the silent grief. It's still here.
Mhm.
It's the silent
Oh,
grief
yeah.
that comes up. And even in our recent trip, like, I had a conversation with, we did a group trip, like it's a retreat, and we were all in a boat for a week, and it was epic, it was
So
adventurous,
cool.
but there was always a trigger in a way, right?
Sure.
And this
Yeah.
is coming from a place that, oh yeah, I'm really doing much better. I'm in a good space. But the
Yeah.
silent grief is there. It's just there.
Yeah.
And you see it, you recognize it. And one time I had this conversation, like, long story short, they also adopted
Okay.
children, and she was asking me, well, what happened with your adoption journey? She had a beautiful journey, three
Mm.
kids grown up, but then for me, and she kept going on, and she was sharing it in a very lovingly way, and I
Okay.
knew that it was well intentioned. But from
Mhm.
my end, I was like, I don't want to get into this anymore because that wasn't really my story. Like,
It's
your
probably
story
very
ended
triggering.
beautifully, right?
Yeah, and, like, good for
But we
you
were
for, like,
literally in the lagoon then, so I was like, I'm in the Maldives, I'm in the
you're
lagoon,
like, "You're
but am I
taking me out of
really?
my special,
I
like,
know.
dream place right now.
Am I
Can we
really
not?"
hearing your beautiful story right now, which is a reminder that mine didn't end
Yeah.
beautifully as
Yeah.
yours, right? But I had to keep a check in my head, and thankfully the other women there were like kind of chiming in the conversation. And
Yeah.
slowly I just kind of walked away and
You
I
could kinda
went to
get
the
yourself
other
out of it.
side,
That's
right,
good.
right, because I needed to shake it off. But the
Yes.
grief is there, and it kind of knocks and knocks on the door, and then you kind of
Mhm.
you welcome it because it's part of the process,
Yeah.
right? The healing
Yep.
continues, and I accepted that this is a lifelong journey and this is
Yeah.
what it is. But I keep checking that, yeah, but I'm also traveling right now. And honestly, at this time, if someone asked me, do you still want a baby? No, not anymore, because I'm in a different place in my life right now.
Yeah.
I'm aging, I'm going through menopause, and
Mhm.
I don't think it's fair for me or the child
Yeah.
to be in this space right now. But it doesn't mean that the grief is no longer there, even though
Right.
I've moved on, right? It's just
Mhm.
there, and that's just what it is right now.
Yeah. It definitely lingers, but I think, everything that you've talked about today, like, there's definitely ways to cope with it and to
Mhm.
to live with it. So actually, perfect segue as we wrap up, one of the last questions I wanted to ask you was like, for anyone listening here today who is going through this could be any kind of loss, it could be, pregnancy, however kind of you want to frame this answer, honestly.
Mhm.
But speaking of grief as in sort of broader terms, I guess. If someone is here listening to your story and they are as inspired by you as I am, but they are going through a difficult time, whatever that looks like for them, is there a specific thing that you have in mind, a tip, a piece of guidance, a word of wisdom, something that you would say to that person who is struggling with an aspect of their grieving journey? Perhaps it's something that really helped you, which it sounds like, you've mentioned therapy, which
Right,
is
right.
so amazing. So glad that you guys sounded like you were on top of that. Is there anything else that you would say to that person or offer as like a coping tool or, just something to help them navigate that?
Yes, I think I would speak directly to women who have experienced the pregnancy loss or who never had children.
Yeah.
And I only say this because I think we have a different type of grief that many people can relate to. Everyone in this world will will suffer a loss, right, of a loved
Yes.
one or a friend.
Yeah.
But it's a different kind of loss. It's the silent grief. It's the silent loss when you never really had an actual baby and there's loss, or it's the loss of a dream that you've always wanted. It's a loss of a lifestyle, a life that you've
Yeah.
always desired, right? So those are all silent. And I think I would speak to that woman, and I would say, first, you are not alone,
Mhm.
because so many of us, so many other women are going through exactly the same thing. And I would encourage you to find those women who could empathize. Surround yourself with other women. I didn't have it in me to find those women at that time. And I don't think there was really a lot of groups or support, like online
Yeah.
communities
Especially when you
existed
first
at
were
that
kinda
time,
going
right? Yeah,
going through this
just
10 years ago. Like,
yeah,
that's
10 years ago.
a
It's
hot minute
so
ago now,
different
yeah.
right now. There's a
It is,
lot
yeah.
more communities, there's a lot more coaching, there's a lot
Yeah.
more support.
Yeah. Like
And I
back
would
then.
encourage you to
Yeah.
get support. And I would,
Yeah.
and if it doesn't even have to be therapy, because I think there's nothing more powerful than receiving empathy. And that
Mhm.
only means connecting with someone who has gone through the same path, who has walked along the same path.
Yeah.
So you are not alone. I see you. I feel you. And there's so much resources out there,
Yeah.
and that you don't have to do this alone. You just keep
Yeah.
going, and that you honor your feelings no matter what. I'm a big believer in really feeling your feelings, like the Inside Out movie. Like it's
Yes, that's
really defining
crazy.
all those like
Yeah.
feelings, right? Because you
Yeah.
need the sadness with the
The
joy.
accuracy.
Joy cannot exist without sadness, because
Right.
sadness allows you to really feel and
Feel that joy.
connect with
Yeah.
others, right? So
So
they
true.
coexist. And I think honor that, honor
Yeah.
everything that you're going through, and then surround
Yeah.
yourself women. And because there's more to life than this loss that will always stay with us,
Mhm.
but we can also choose to just keep living your lives. And I think if you, and I know a lot of your, you lost a loved one, and that loved one would want you to live a full life as well. And for the
What I
ones who
say.
have lost
Yeah.
other pregnancies, and such as me, then we get to have a life full, even though without children. Like
Yeah.
live a full, joyful life
So
and feel complete even without the presence of children.
yeah, it's truly in kind of how we define it. We can absolutely allow ourselves to be defined by what we do or do not have in
Right.
every aspect of life. Oh, they have a better house than me. They have children. They have this, they
Mm-hmm.
have that. They have parents. I don't. It's we can choose to live there, suffer there, get stuck there. 100%. That's your
Yeah.
prerogative. But then I come back to what you said. It's like, what kind of life is that though, really?
Yeah.
Where we can feel empowered and take back a little bit of the ownership of it. Like we can own our own journey and grief. And but everything you just said is exactly what I would have said. And also and the secondary losses, like you were saying, like acknowledging that. That's really been a
Yeah.
big thing for
Isn't
me
that what you
lately.
call it? A secondary loss?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Okay.
for, there's kind of well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess like for some people,
No,
like
I like that. I like that. I've
yeah,
never
I
heard of
mean, so,
that.
like, for example, loss of a child, right? Or loss of a
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy or a mom or a dad. That's kind of our primary loss, I guess. But then I think
Mm-hmm.
where a lot of people feel what I certainly didn't come up with this, but, what would be defined as secondary losses is like, that loss of sense of identity,
Mm-hmm.
financial loss potentially, depending on what the situation is, or just, financial strain, whatever. Depending if you maybe, like, lost a job or something, okay, that's kinda like our primary loss, but then, like, maybe you have to move because of that, or you have to downsize, or, it's like those sort of like ripple effect losses that are silent and are not spoken about enough. That future that we
Right.
thought we were going to
Exactly.
have that we are robbed of. Like, and I guess I kind of, you can define it as a secondary loss, but listen, if someone defines it as a primary loss, I'm not going to
No.
argue with you. Like
Yeah,
that is
absolutely.
a
But I
loss.
do like that. I like the
Um,
secondary loss, and I like
yeah, like it's not
the
that one's
silent
more
loss, right?
important than the other. It's just
Right. A
that
loss is
one
a
can
loss,
stem
right?
from exactly, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
My God,
Yeah.
tell me about it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time today, your vulnerability, and your openness on everything that you shared. I am so sorry. I know this is like so cliche, but I'm just so sorry for just the countless heartbreaks that you had to endure. I know there are people listening here that even if they don't have the exact same story as you, can see themselves in you in their own way. And again, I just really thank you for sharing all of that. But also, again, these beautiful mindset little shifts and things
Right.
to keep in mind that people can, even if it doesn't quite hit today or resonate right now, like I say this many, many times on this podcast, like I think these are all good things to hear and keep in mind, because if we hear them enough, we start to
Right.
believe them, and like it's like, "Oh, that can actually happen for me too."
Yeah.
So, you're so inspiring, and I just love you. Thank you so much for everything you brought to us today.
I appreciate that. Thank you for all your kind and sweet words. I mean,
Yeah,
yes, I appreciate, like, the loss has happened, so many losses, right? But I think I wouldn't be the person I am right now. I wouldn't be the woman I
sure.
am today if it weren't for all those trials, if you will. So
Mhm.
thank you. Thank you
Putting it
for this
mildly.
opportunity to share my story. I
You're
really appreciate you. I
welcome.
appreciate everything that you're doing. And I love
Thank
you.
you.
And I know I can't wait to have another conversation with you in my
I know there's probably
podcast.
gonna be a round 3 here somewhere. Oh,
There's
really quick,
so much to talk
also,
about.
where can
So,
people hear your podcast? Like, where can people get in touch with you, work with you, hear your podcast, all the good things? And this will all be linked
yes.
in the show notes too.
So my podcast is called By Chance Avenue, and about sacred conversations around being childless by chance, not by choice. I have social media, Instagram. It's called By Chance Avenue. Website is also bychanceavenue.com. So it's
Consistent. Love it.
By Chance Avenue. It's a sacred path to redefining one
Oh,
story about being childless.
amazing.
So
Thank you
thank
so
you,
much
thank
for
you,
your
thank you,
time
thanks so much.
today. I really appreciate it. I am sending you a huge thank you for tuning into today's episode, my friend. I'm so grateful you're here and for the steps you are taking to heal your heart, open your mind, fulfill your soul, learn, grow, and evolve, and move through this crazy thing called life in big, beautiful, impactful ways. Visit lossesbecomegains.com for my blog, more coping tools, ways to work with me, and so much more. And be sure you're following along on Instagram and Facebook at Losses Become Gains, and on Instagram and TikTok at Life with Grief Podcast. I love seeing new faces, meeting new people, hearing your stories, and supporting you however I can. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and share this episode or this podcast with someone who could use it too. And remember to always keep asking yourself, how will I turn my losses into gains today? I'll catch you in the next episode.